Hello, and welcome back for another pre-lab video. This is Callan Bentley, and this week we are diving into the first of several labs about oceanography. Oceanography, of course, is the study of the world's ocean, and there are different components to that ocean. Sometimes we describe portions of the world ocean by their own names, such as Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic, things like that. And there are smaller units still, seas and bays, things like that we need to identify as well. So one of the first things that you're going to do this week in lab is basically orient yourself. You're going to identify the various features labeled on this map with their proper names. You're also going to do a little bit of calculations regarding how much of the Earth is land and how much is ocean, and how that varies between the different hemispheres. So you'll be using this graph, which basically shows area in millions of square kilometers as it compares with latitude. So this is the northern hemisphere here, and then this would be the southern hemisphere down here at the bottom. You're going to spend a fair amount of time looking at the shape of the seafloor. Now we know the shape of the seafloor because we have mapped it using sonar. Sonar has an outgoing sound signal that emanates from a ship or a little robot towed behind the ship. That sound signal hits the bottom of the sea and then bounces back up to the ship where it is recorded. And the amount of time it takes to go down and then come back up is reflective of how deep the ocean is at that spot. This sort of data is presented in this table, table 10.1 from the lab manual. And what you have here is a comparison between distance from a starting point, shown in the central column, and then the depth of the ocean at that position. So you're going to take this data and graph it, and depending on the pattern of the data, you may get a profile of the ocean that looks something like that, or perhaps you'll get a profile that looks something like that. You won't know until you graph it. Different profiles reflect different features on the seafloor. Some of those features are shown here in this image. Up at the top you can see the continental shelf, the continental slope, the continental rise, the abyssal plain, and then decorating the abyssal plain are a series of seamounts. All those features are the sorts of things that you're going to need to label in another diagram like the one on the bottom. You'll also consider the composition of the ocean. So we're going to start off with a fairly simple aspect of the ocean, which is its salinity. And basically here on this graph you have a comparison between how saline the water is, in other words, how much stuff is dissolved in it, or how salty is that salt water, and that's compared to the depth. So salinity increases from left to right, depth increases obviously from top to bottom. Now you have three different latitudes shown on this graph: polar latitudes in blue, the equatorial latitudes in red, and then the subtropical latitudes in yellow. And you're going to be asked to compare these and make some hypotheses about why they are different. You're also going to do a series of experiments, and these experiments involve different aspects of the ocean and how they turn over. So one of the things that we're really interested in is how the water in the ocean moves over time. One of the main variables that we need to look at there is this process called convection. And convection is the movement of less dense material up and more dense material down. Several different things can control convection. And in one instance, you're going to take a look at chemistry. The first experiment will examine salinity. You'll be given a couple of solutions, and then you'll pour one solution into the other. Measure how quickly it goes down toward the bottom. The denser it is, the faster it will move. Another example is going to take a look at the role of temperature. So here you're going to use some warm water and some cold water. The cold water will be dyed so that it's easy to see, and then basically you're going to pour it in, and again you're going to measure how quickly it takes to get down to the bottom. The colder it is, you would expect the faster it's going to travel because it's going to be more dense. So that's all that you really need to do this week in lab. It's going to be a fairly simple introduction to oceanography, and then once these basics are established, we'll return to oceanography in subsequent labs. Good luck!